Welcome to Chapter 14B. Leaving Georgina's note on the table, I headed out for my walk. I hadn't gone far when I spotted Lorcan speaking with some of the neighboring farmers. I remembered hearing his plane this morning, and it made me wonder how he seemed to materialize at my weakest moments. If last night wasn't enough, now he had to see me moving like an arthritic crab. Good morning, I called to the group at large. Beautiful day, isn't it? The farmers lifted their caps and raised their hands in greeting. Then Lorcan broke away to join me. Hey, I'm glad to see you're feeling better, he said. Thanks, I'll be okay. So what are you doing with the local farmers? You're not around here very often. I imagined you spend most of your time pursuing loftier goals in your airplane. Speaking of which, didn't I hear your winged bird flying overhead this morning? Larkin paused and studied the papers in his hand before answering. Yes, you did. I took off to check the weather conditions, but the ceilings were too low for visual flight, so I changed my mind about the trip. As for the rest of your questions, you haven't been here long enough to know much about what I do. His fingers played with the edges of the paper. The local farmers and I have created a new water scheme for the area. Water? I'd have thought the climate provided all the water the farmers needed. It may appear that it rains all the time, but we do have our droughts. Last year's was a doozy, and many of the livestock, not to mention the farmers themselves, suffered from the intense heat and lack of water. Lorcan tapped to his papers with one finger. So I created a device that will bring water from some of the local lakes to the farms. Oh, that sounds useful, I said, although I hated to admit it. Well, let me know if I can help with anything. Lorcan looked down at his papers again before continuing. With the accident yesterday, I was wondering if you're still planning on attending the gala tonight. His blue eyes caught mine directly at that moment. I busied my hands by pushing my sleeves up to my elbows and adjusting my sunglasses while I considered my options. I reminded myself that I had made a commitment. Plus, I didn't want to disappoint Aunt Georgina. I'm going, I told him, but I may want to leave early. I'm not much of a night person, and I have a busy day tomorrow. We can leave the event early if you want, Lorcan replied. It's only a short ride from here to Pontoon, and my mother will be happy to hear that you're on the move. She was worried, and it will do her good to see you in person. Lorcan gently squeezed my elbow and redirected his attention back to the men. Now it was my turn to be surprised. I hadn't expected this gentle kindness from him. On the way back from my walk, Anne Sullivan, one of my neighbors, waved me over to her gate. I picked some flowers for you, she said, offering a large bouquet of roses, zinnias, daisies, and daffodils from her garden. Well, thank you very much, I said as I took hold of them. Admiring the vibrant yellows, oranges, and reds, I buried my nose in their fragrance. They're beautiful. I always gave Dylan flowers when he was on holiday, she said. That was a long time ago. I miss his visits. It's nice to see a light in his cottage again at night. Will you be staying long? Then she quickly added, wouldn't it be nice if you stayed in Ireland? For a moment I felt emotionally ripped apart, torn between the beauty of this country and my own ties back in New Jersey. I was divided by two uncontrollable forces, needing to know my mother and wanting to live my own life. Why hadn't Dylan told me about this place? Why hadn't we journeyed here together on my quest? When had he visited, and why? I shook my head to jar these notions from my head. I already had enough to take care of without letting Dylan's secrets use up more space. I'd deal with that later. Besides, whatever his reasons were, I'm sure they had been out of love for me. Of that, I was certain. Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan, I said. I'll stop up one evening to visit you before I leave. Then I touched her hand before continuing back to the cottage. When I opened the door, I saw the answering machine light was blinking. Oh no, Raymond Nolan's office, I thought to myself. But when it hit the button, Peter's voice asked how I felt and said that he'd call me later. I smiled when I realized that I looked forward to it. I arrived at Nolan's office at 1 o'clock because I wasn't taking any chances. While I waited, I wondered about Nolan's motives and feelings regarding Matthew. From what Aunt Georgina had said and what I had gleaned from the newspapers in the library, Sharon, Raymond, and Matthew spent a lot of time together between working at the foundation and attending social functions. So, what happened between them to turn Nolan surly whenever he spoke about Matthew? Raymond Nolan wasn't happy to see me when his assistant escorted me to his office door. Miss O'Brien, this way, he said in a tone of voice terse enough to sound like Morse code. He opened the door and then turned his back while I tracked him into his inner sanctum. He pointed to a visitor's chair and then lowered himself into one at his desk. What now, Miss O'Brien? I'm busy this afternoon. I've been out of the office and I have a lot of messages to return. I couldn't help noticing that he never mentioned my cuts and bruises, although I caught him perusing my knees. Don't you want to know how I got these injuries? I don't give a damn how you got them. Dublin can be a dangerous place. Maybe you should return to where you came from. That's interesting. I never mentioned Dublin. What makes you think that's where this happened? I'm not stupid, Miss O'Brien. Inasmuch as I don't really want to have anything to do with you, it was fairly obvious to me when I saw you yesterday that something had happened. I just assumed it happened in the city. That's all. Surprised by his acknowledgement, I continued with my purpose for the visit. I want access to Matthew's files, I said, looking at him straight in the eye. I knew getting the files was an unlikely possibility, but I'd make my best effort. You want access to his private files? Nolan asked. His eyes bulged as his face flushed scarlet. Yes, I replied without hesitation. I've been to Tranquility House in Dublin. Matthew was there a few days before he died. He inquired about the resident dependency program. The files may provide a clue about who he planned to admit there. His interest in the program must be related to his death. Of course it's related. Have you ever considered that he may have had a drug problem? That the interest in Tranquility House was for himself? He pounded the desk to punctuate his statement. There's no indication that Matthew was a user. The drugs found on his body were in his pants. I continued to hold his eyes with mine. I know the report says his bloodstream contained trace amounts, but nothing in the way he lived his life coincides with that finding. No indication that a Yank who doesn't know the local people or how things are done around here would see, Nolan shot back as he continued pounding on the desk. Just who do you think you are, nosing about into other people's business? Is there something you want to tell me that will enlighten me? I asked. I don't believe anyone could enlighten you, Miss O'Brien. Perhaps you want more people to die, and then you'll be satisfied. I won't give you his files. The desk experienced one last thump before Nolan jumped up and began pacing back and forth behind it. So you do know something, I said, as an anger matching his began erupting inside me. Maybe you're the one who had something to do with this murder. Just how innocent are you in all of this? And who else do you think might die? Me? Are you threatening me? Someone tried to run me down yesterday in Dublin. Who will testify to your activities and whereabouts yesterday? This outburst may have surprised me more than it did Nolan. I was Star O'Brien, and I didn't admit fear to anyone. Was my anger directed at the person who had almost hit me, or at the woman I'd imagined was my mother? When I finished speaking, he stopped pacing and plopped down again behind his desk. I won't give you the files. They're private, he said flatly. Then he attacked the desk with his hand again. I'm telling you, Matthew was dirty. I saw him with Alan Skye. There can only be one reason for that. Like what? And who's Alan Skye? I'm surprised you don't know him. Dylan Hilldale. Weren't you Hill's fiance? I stopped breathing. Nolan's words slammed into me as if he'd crashed a fist into my heart. How many secrets did Dylan have? I couldn't help wondering. Meanwhile, Nolan continued talking through my silence. Alan Skye is a known drug dealer who targets children. He's too slippery for the guards to pin anything on him. I've come across him several times in the past 2 years when I've been working with some of the teenagers who are in our program. Nolan paused, rubbed the hand he'd been using to hammer the desk, and then continued. Matthew knew him. I saw the two of them recently at the Wagon Wheel pub. They had a fight, and they didn't like it when they caught me observing them. I began getting excited. This could be the information I needed to find out what troubled Matthew before his death. Did you overhear anything? I asked. Did they say anything to you? They took off as soon as they realized I'd spotted them. That's all I can tell you. No decent person could spend any time in that vermin Skye's company. Matthew must have been mixed up in something. Something he didn't tell me about. Now, please don't waste any more of my time, he said, scowling at me as he thrust himself out of his chair. Thanks, I smiled at him and carried myself, as well as my dignity, back outside.